Welcome everyone to the privacy versus attribution panel we're going to hold today. If you are advertising and you're dealing with users' data, you've been struggling, as all of us, with understanding attribution and doing attribution in the past years. What we'll try to achieve today is to maybe explain a bit more on the changes that already happened, the mechanism of SKAN, what will happen or already happening, what is already happening with SKAN 4.0, and what we're facing with the privacy manifest of Apple and Sandbox that are coming to us soon enough. So without further ado, we'll do the intros and start digging into the super easy to understand topic of SKAN. I'll start, so Guy from Beach Bum, head of marketing for new games. Been with the company for more than a year.
Perfect. Hey everyone, I'm Jimmy. I lead product marketing at Moloco. Relatively new, started in December, but prior to Moloco was at TikTok, where I led, my team led product strategy and operations for all performance measurement, including iOS 14 back in the day when it first launched, which was fun. And then also spent many years at Google working on a bunch of attribution and privacy solutions as well.
Hello everyone, I am Dan from Papaya, previously Papaya Gaming. I'm in the company for about 3 years. I'm managing the UA activities for all the titles, and I've been dealing a lot with SKAN and other iOS issues, as we are mainly iOS-focused gaming company.
I'm Hadar Telem, Director of Business Product Operations at INCRMNTAL. Up until very recently, I was the Director of Marketing Analytics at Huge Games. I've been there for 4 years. So before SKAN, during SKAN, I was like helping prepare the organization to iOS 14. Also previously from Playtica. And I was actually a client of INCRMNTAL back at Huge. And I decided to join INCRMNTAL because I think it's really helpful and I really believe in their product. The product is a platform that helps marketers measure the incrementality of their marketing and offline campaigns without needing user-level data and without relying or replacing attribution. So it's another decision-making tool that is super, super helpful and important, especially these days.
So nice to meet you. My name is Uriel Malvey. I'm from Barcelona, from Smadex. You may know us as being a performance DSP, or maybe because of our booth, our game that we have planned here, so I don't know. But myself, I have been working and I have been leading the SKAN efforts and SKAN since I joined almost 2 years ago. We have a dedicated team trying to figure out how it works and trying to create a product that will benefit of this new source of attribution that was introduced by Apple.
Great, thank you guys. So before we start, ATT Workframe was introduced 2020. Apple announced it and then pushed it gradually through 2021. It practically killed attribution, and before we start explaining, we wanted to maybe touch what is SKAN. What is this solution and what are its limitations? So maybe, Oriol, you can start and share your knowledge about it.
Yeah, sure. So as Guy is saying, Apple was introduced some years ago, and we have seen quite some evolution since the beginning. All the new versions that have been coming out. Now we have the exciting 4.0 version, and we have already seen some news about 5.0. So we are seeing these super fast changes that this is bringing. So this is why we are from our side trying to understand it, how it works since the beginning. We have been trying to figure out each version, which definitely has helped us in order to advance in the new version. So SKAN, in a nutshell, what it is basically a new attribution that was presented by Apple when they shared the ATT. What it does, what it has, the issues basically is that the delays that data gets, the amount of information, the thresholds that you need to pass, it was definitely a big challenge. It was definitely, and is still definitely something that different approaches need to be taken in order to make most use out of it. I think this is one of the main challenges, and trying to see how you adapt your current strategy to make SKAN work. I think from our side, from the DSP side, what we were trying to do is trying to help with this learning phase of understanding the changes. So we try to give these insights to the different clients in order to adapt their strategies in order to be able to use and utilize SKAN as it is.
Any additions on SKAN mechanism?
Yeah, so it's a totally different way of measurement. It's a different reporting. It's not relying on ATT. I think it's important to mention what is ATT, basically the pop-up that the users get each time they open the app. So what changed is basically that instead of being opted in, where the user, where we are as advertisers are getting the user level data as a default, what's changed is that since ATT, basically the user has to say, I agree to send you my user level data, and that really shifted the numbers and ratios of user level data we get. And SKAN is basically Apple's solution to getting us all the data about the users, regardless of consent, but it's just way more limited.
Definitely, and also it highly affected short-term optimization, KPIs, how you look at the KPIs you set for yourselves for the longer phase to reach your long-term goals. Definitely, maybe we'll touch a bit on SKAN 4.0 that was already available on October 24th, but then rolling out slowly as Moloco, as I learned, are supporting it already, and Meta will support it in a few weeks from now. What are the changes that SKAN 4.0 brought and how it's going to be utilized in the day-to-day work?
So one of the key features, or a few of the key features that SKAN 4.0 is bringing to us is multiply postbacks. SKAN 3.0 and earlier had only one postbacks that only had an indication of the, let's call it first 24, 48 hours of the user or in the install, and now we get actually 3 types of postbacks. The first postback have a much lower, let's call it null ratio threshold, so we can actually get much richer type of data for the users, either a null or an indication of cross-grain value, such as low, medium, or high, if you didn't reach enough installs. And then you have the normal, as you are familiar with, 64 different values as the current setup for 3.0. So this is the first early stage postback. This is the same thing, but it's still capped at 48 hours. And then you have a random delay from 1 or 2 days, 24 or 48 hours. So you actually get the first postbacks of an indication of the install, actually between 72 to 96 hours. Then you have another postback. This is the first edition, or the, let's call it change with 4.0, that you have an indication of the user activity from 3 to 7 days. This indication, you get only a soft grain, only a cross grain, so you can get only low, medium, or high actual value. So you don't have the actual, let's call it conversion value, but you have some indication of the quality. And then same thing with between 8 to 35 days, an indication of the activity, and then again a delay of 1 to 6 days. Then you get the last postbacks with, again, 3 types of low, medium, high. 4.0 also bringing us, we need actually to define if on SKAN 3.0 or earlier, we actually defined one scheme, 0 to 63. In terms of values, now we can define 4 types of schemes. First one is, as we are already familiar, 0 to 63, and then other ones for low, medium, highs for each type of postbacks. So this is basically giving us the flexibility to get some level of data for different periods of time for the user activity. We will only get the postbacks if the user was actually available or active, open the app within those time frames. So this is the main differences that SKAN 4.0 bring us in terms of like longer attribution or longer measurements for the user, and not only for the first stage of his life cycle. This is the first thing. Another thing is web to app actually support. Beforehand, we didn't get any web to app attribution. Now, every install that will come from a web to app that is generated from Safari. Google Chrome is still excluded on that front, so it was generated from the Safari, will be supported and part of the SKAN game or attribution mechanism. So this is also a very big thing. Another big thing is also, until now in 3.0, there was only 2 types of source level identifications. Now there are 4 types. Of course, there is still let's call it a game with the amount of installs in order to get the full levels of authentication. But those authentications will be the end network control. But we can basically get it to a geo group or to creative or to placement. The ad network itself will control what type of data we will get. But we as marketers can utilize it because it will be transparent for us and we can actually translate it. So we can utilize it in order to get much more granular data. These are the main things. And the last change is until now with 3.0, you can go only up with the conversion value from 0 to 63. If you went down, it didn't actually update. So now in 4.0, you can actually go back with the conversion value, and we will actually get the final value post-backs later. These are the main changes. Another pain point is you cannot actually correlate or stick the same postbacks from the same install from day 1, 7, 35. You won't be able to identify this is the same install. It will still be anonymous and be on an aggregated level.
Thank you. Well explained. We do understand there are reporting implications, which I'll be happy if you can elaborate on, Jimmy. On the optimization, also, Google are already testing conversion value optimization. Will you be handling this, and what should we expect moving forward with SKAN 4.0?
Yeah, I think there's two implications with SKAN 4.0. The first is on reporting, which I'll talk about. The second, and pretty interesting thing, is on optimization. So on reporting, right, the journey of Moloco for enabling SKAN 4.0 optimization is, earlier this year we're in single-digit adoption numbers of, eligible traffic on SKAN 4.0. Now we're actually at 30%. And so what we did was we enabled reporting via AppsFlyer. So if you use AppsFlyer and Moloco, you can get SKAN 4.0 reporting. I won't get into the super detailed weeds, but I think the main takeaway I would have for you guys is now is the time to start experimenting with, you have multiple postbacks, you have, different configurations, and essentially you get a little bit deeper view of user engagement within your app. SKAN 3.0 is pretty limiting in terms of, you just had the 2-day window and that was it. Now you can kind of start tracking, further user engagements, which is, really important. So I would, encourage you all to start testing and start thinking about it soon. The second part is optimization. I think this is an interesting one. So context is historically, and this is coming from TikTok and Moloco and folks at Google, is that given the SKAN data was so limited, it wasn't used for optimization. So essentially what that means is bidding model, right? Like our machine learning models that do bidding and targeting and all the the core of our infrastructure. It uses iOS opt-in data and Android data and essentially extrapolates out for SKAN. And SKAN was purely like a reporting mechanism. And that was just because there was such limited data. Now with SKAN 4.0, we do have more data, and what that means is you can actually start. We're thinking deeply about this in Moloco, and testing is using this extra level of data into optimization models, and that's important, right? Because iOS opt-out users are very different than Android users, than potentially even iOS opt-in users, and so you can get a better targeting and better positioning. So we've been testing it. We're seeing pretty good results internally. And yeah, we're excited to hopefully roll it out soon.
Great, thank you. So we discussed reporting and optimization. Definitely significant changes. Also in understanding the user's progress and LTV. Without the optimization part, it can be huge with the short window we have now with SKAN 3.0. If we discuss on moving forward, everything that goes to privacy manifest and the changes that are coming with iOS 17, which is fairly soon. What can we further expect on the fingerprinting, the word Apple despises the most? What changes are coming to the network world, or what we know as a user acquisition?
Sure. I'll talk about this briefly, and I'll talk about something else a little bit later. But basically what happened, I think everyone was holding their breath for WWDC is hey, is Apple going to enforce probabilistic attribution, aka fingerprinting, right? Essentially what happened is I view it as a middle ground. And so it's not going to be super enforced yet, but what they're going to do is start giving developers tools to understand which networks or which SDKs are using probabilistic. And in a sense, what it does is that then they have to kind of justify why they're continuing to let those SDKs be there. This is my personal opinion, but I think this is the first step in the progression to actually enforce probabilistic. I think it's coming. I think probabilistic data using IPUA has broader implications outside of marketing. So I think they have to be careful about it. But I think with this, it is their kind of like first baby step into policing it eventually. So I do think eventually probabilistic will be going away.
So we want to discuss attribution. Since the release of SKAN, there were a lot of methods, some very creative, some are not. Looking at the data on aggregated level, looking at the data from the App Store Connect side, which proceeds and trying to calculate your revenues. Hadar, maybe you can share on attribution in general. How do you attribute now in this world? Like, how can you understand what are the real results of your activities?
Yeah, so basically everything changed, but there are still a lot of things that kind of look the same but are not the same. Like if you ask a marketer what do they look like, what do they look at their day-to-day, they will still say, I'm looking at ROS day 7, I'm still measuring day 30, but how? You don't, like you have SKAN and you have, like most of the users and advertisers still rely heavily on probabilistic data. As I said at the beginning, probabilistic data used to be about like 30% of the data because we used to have 70% of IDFAs or device level data, and this is basically what we've lost. We're now at like 20% rate of ATT acceptance rate at best. It's very hard to utilize it, and then it gives much more place for probabilistic. Probabilistic is a method of like just trying to identify where is the user probably came from. Which gives a lot of room for hacking, fraudulent installs. It is based on IP in many cases, so if we're all using the Wi-Fi of this conference, we might be all considered as the same user, which is kind of problematic. So right now, as long as you rely heavily on probabilistic, you know that your data is kind of inaccurate, but still it's the best you can get, so this is what most advertisers use. In my perspective, the world is going to aggregated data. Reporting is going to be on aggregated data. There is the Google Sandbox that is upcoming. There are like Facebook not sending user-level data, even if the user consents for like over a year. So this is where the world is going to. So I think that one of the best things about INCRMNTAL is that it doesn't rely on user-level data. It uses only aggregated data, and it tries to understand, based on your change in spend, what you've done now, what is the impact on your overall marketing mix, including organics, including everything. So I think the world is going towards decision-making tools and identifying trends across different tools to try to find the best mix for you, for your activity, for your game, for your app. I believe that user-level data should be gone. And this is also why I joined INCRMNTAL, because I honestly think that this is where the world should go.
Outstanding.
Can I elaborate one thing?
Yeah.
All right, this is my last thing, and I think it's an important point, though. So I think it's very interesting what SKAN did to the ecosystem outside of just SKAN. So, SKAN happened, right? Deterministic turned into probabilistic. And, a lot of advertisers continue to rely on probabilistic data, right? It's similar. It's like real-time, user level. And it's similar how people reported before. But essentially what it created is like something we're calling like a click arms race. So essentially to prove out value on iOS via probabilistic, a lot of networks are participating in like pretty deceptive tactics. Meaning, you have your creative side and then like firing clicks. So on the creative side, right, like impossible to close X buttons, a million end cards popping up. If SK overlay renders, probabilistic will fire click 100% of the time. We've heard from advertisers that you're seeing CTR rates of like 70, 80, 90%. Obviously, that's not indicative of like actual user intent. And so I think what this means for probabilistic is like, it's very hard now to discern an actual user intent of someone who is like actually influenced by the ad versus someone that was just, was forced to click on an ad or a click was fired in general. And so I think this is like, it's pretty bad for the entire ecosystem in my point of view, right? For the user side, they get these horrible ad experiences. They complain about it. The publisher side, users don't understand the intricacies of how ads are displayed and like how it comes through different networks. They just blame the publisher, right? You'll see a million one-star reviews about these bad experiences. And then for marketers, right, it's impossible to discern if you're looking at probabilistic who was actually influenced by your ad or who was, where a click was actually forced. And those users that would have converted organically or maybe were influenced by another network. And so we're kind of in this clicks arms race in probabilistic. And so if you guys do rely on probabilistic, like take a good look at it and don't don't view the numbers at face value, is what I would say. It's a pretty nuanced and complex topic, so happy to chat about more later, but I think it's very important for the industry.
Thank you. One point for the UA people here. I've been doing this in the past 9 years. We've seen some, many changes, not some, many changes in the industry, algorithms, campaign types even. I would say it was a significant change that came to us and forced us in July, at least 2021, to start thinking about our goals. Dan, maybe in 2 sentences, can you share how did it impact your day-to-day or your optimization, your KPIs? How do you look at data since then?
So for us, it's mainly, first thing, it depends on which network, on which type of activity we are looking on. But first thing, we don't have one source of truth kind of data. We are actually doing multiply touch points or multiply inclusion of different data points, both from SKAN, probabilistic, and some kind of incremental that we do on our in-house in order to measure and try to find the different source of truth and to see which one benefits us the most and which one are actually influence and not directly from, as you said, click overflowing or other methods of influencing the probabilistic or different types of attribution. So we are leaning much more towards user intent and then actually attributing and doing our own enrichment to the attribution. So I think things will go this direction more and more when you will need to look on more than one place in order to find your source of truth. Not only probabilistic, not only SKAN network, but actually the mix of both, and to test and try with yourself and with your right customization and the right scheme that will work for your business model in order to support the best attribution and to give you the best value on that front.
I agree. If I can share one tip for my end, at least, is trying to correlate your early user metrics or behaviors to the long term you're expecting to see. It requires a lot of analysis. We've seen a lot of success also with our talented head of analytics that is here in the audience, taking pictures of me and not listening right now. But it's one of the ways to try and at least set the right goals for the short term. We have now at least optimization in the systems. So, philosophical question now. Do you think SKAN is going to be the only attribution method at some point, like reliable one that we can understand what's going on based upon?
Yeah, so coming back to what Jimmy said before, I think there's a trend moving on towards this privacy world. I think SKAN is the beginning, and then there's APS, which we will talk about later. I think there's definitely this trend to have this more private world. This is why I believe that in the future this will be the only source of attribution. This is why also at Smadex we have taken this gamble to try to understand it since the beginning and try to be early adopters. We have been running for 4.0 for quite some time. We're close to 40% of the traffic that we're using with some clients with 4.0. We started to change the different strategies. We are seeing a lot of changes of this new version, which implicate that having this time before or having this early adoption is going to be key in order to be ready when the full adoption is here. We have this percentage of traffic which we believe that is sufficient enough to start learning how and start transitioning to this new idea. So we encourage to start testing for sure, and also as still we still have MMP data. I think it's also important to try to validate all the changes that you do with SKAN with also some MMP data. We can do as well some MMP creatives optimizations. I think that's quite the way, but I believe that in the future, these previous learnings that we can gather are going to be key in order for the future if, for example, we only have SKAN as the only source of attribution. I wanted to say something. We have been talking with Apple. We had the opportunity to talk with someone from their team, and we have been able to understand more or less. We first thought they're not listening to our feedback. We know that for the first versions, there were only issues with SKAN. And we're seeing with 4.0, we're super excited because we are seeing some changes. We're seeing them listen to the feedback and try to adapt their solution to be able to satisfy as many types of strategies as possible. And as we have seen with SKAN 5, we're also going to have some kind of retargeting, which is something that was asked. I believe this approach is kind of strange, how slow and what the changes that they have been applying. But I believe this will definitely get better. Everyone will be able to make it work better. And I think this will be, I think SKAN is here to stay.
Right, we'll take one more answer and move forward to the next topic.
Okay, I'll just say that according to Apple, SKAN should already be the single source of attribution, but we all know that in reality it's not sufficient yet. It's not enough data, not enough information, so I do believe that we need to have more decision-making tools in order to make a decision today.
Interesting enough. So there are two S words that are frightening enough, SKAN, and the second one is sandbox. Google are also bringing the power back to the users, and the changes are coming in H2 2024, but still been tested already with iOS 13, are gonna bring some different approaches to reporting, to optimization, and we're gonna learn, again, probably user acquisition and general attribution from the start. Maybe, Jimmy, how are you preparing to this, and what should we expect?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So, working at Google for many years, they're definitely taking their time, listening to feedback, understanding the market before they'll rush out with a solution. It's a very different ad business than Apple, right? Like, there's very clear motivations with Apple and there's very clear motivations with Google. So, we've been working with the Sandbox team pretty closely. Like how I would summarize it would be Sandbox is actually, it impacts more broadly than SKAN or than iOS 14.5, but SKAN cuts deeper. And so what I mean by that is, there's going to be no opt-in or opt-out. Everyone's just going to be in Sandbox. There's going to be implications for reporting. There's going to be implications for bidding. There's going to be implications from the server side for ad targeting. So the implications are big. It's going to be a massive change coming. And the reason I say it's not as deep is that Google is listening to our feedback. For example, like Moloco, we're heavily invested in our machine learning models, and Google is working with us to allow our models to use Android Sandbox data from the start. And so that's just an example of, they are listening to the market. They're kind of building with us rather than just kind of dropping a bomb on us and then having to react. So big changes coming. But that said, I think, they're going to be more approachable with solutions.
Yeah, I agree. I think from the few conversations I had with them, it feels like they're not going to kill attribution. They're going to just make it better for the users. And also soon to tell, because it's going to take time until it's going to be fully rolled out. So SKAN 4 is the main thing to deal with right now. I think we're at the end of our agenda, but we want to leave some time for questions, right? We have 4 more minutes? 3 more minutes. Okay. Great. So feel free. Yes, please.
Yeah. Hi. How do you see the trend of influencer marketing amid all this tracking problem? Because influencer, you need one-to-one tracking, and now influencer marketing is really on the rise, not to the mobile maybe, but it's coming to mobile, but mainly to e-commerce on the web. But I see a lot of trends and a lot of engagement with native mobile and influencer marketing / affiliates. How do these two collide, meet, or doesn't meet, ever?
So the question shortly is, how do you track influencer activity with the rise of it right now?
For me it's easy, because on incremental,
incrementality, yes, clearly.
As long as you measure everything on an aggregated level, then you don't care about user level data. You don't need a QR code or anything like that. So you can measure influencers, you can measure TV campaigns, as long as
measurements for settlements. So
yeah, but if you know the spend of your influencer campaign and you're looking at the overall traffic, regardless to incremental, which is what we do, but in general, how you can measure it is if you look at your overall traffic and try to see the impact of a single activity overall on your overall mix, then you can see it. With incremental, it's easier because you don't need to stop anything else or any other marketing activity to isolate your certain activity. But that's why I think the world is heading there.
I want to say something. So think about it. It depends what you define influencer activity, right? You can use it in your ongoing paid activity, and then it's kind of more easy. You can use separate links or separate bonuses or separate like benefits for the specific activity and measure it. You can do a geo lift. Choose a geo that you want to buy more media or develop, and then use a local influencer to check the difference there. This is more of an incrementality discussion. But there are many creative ways, not definite ways, not super exact, but you can try and measure at least.
Probabilistic is the answer there as well.
Yeah, but influencer marketing it's always been hard to measure, right? There's never been like a perfect correlation. You know, if someone runs an ad, sure you can have like whatever discount codes or QR codes, or whatever it might be.
That make it a rev share deal, for example, with an influencer. It's accurate. Do it today for e-commerce. It's 100% accurate.
It depends how many people are coming through this. You don't know what is the side impact of this activity, and this is the main question here, I think. What questions? We're done. Okay, so I'm sorry we don't have time, but you can talk with the panel after it. I want to thank everyone here. Highly proficient. I spoke with them in the past week. Great guys, great team. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.